Hello, welcome to this week's Parsha discussion. Hello, Nelson. Perfect timing. We were just getting started.
Mhm.
Um, we This week's Parsha is Parshat Va'etchanan, and there is actually a very big mitzvah in this Parsha, and I was sure that Rav Tabori would do it, which is the mitzvah to love Hashem, which is such a troublesome mitzvah. I mean, not troublesome in its content, but sort of how to approach such a mitzvah. The Rambam spends a lot of time on it. But interestingly, Rav Tabori chose to write about Mezuzah, and it's a very interesting mitzvah. So we're going to put aside loving Hashem, and we'll come back to that some other year. Um, it's a also a very busy parsha because it is Moshe's recitation of the Aseret Dibrot. So there are many mitzvot found in this week's parsha. But I think mezuzah is an interesting one, especially because it is one of those mitzvot that we learned are conditional, right? That if you don't have a doorpost, you don't have to put up a mezuzah. Sort of like if you're not wearing a four-cornered garment, you don't have to wear tzitzit. And yet it is, even though it is conditional, it's so I don't know if pervasive is the right word, right? It is, we once invited someone to our house for Shabbat, an older gentleman in our community, and we gave him our address, but I guess maybe he couldn't see the number. And he said, well, I just looked for your mezuzah, right? Like it's no, everyone has a mezuzah, right? We wouldn't think of not, and maybe that's because we all have many doorposts in our houses, thank goodness. But it seems to be it's identifiable in a lot of ways, right? Or if you drive through a neighborhood and you say, "Oh, there are a lot of mezuzahs here." Like we went to now I'm going to forget what it's called. It's a neighborhood on the western side of Lake Michigan, like on the Michigan side. And someone had told us that it used to be a sort of Jewish vacation town. And as we drove through town, we saw a lot of mezuzahs, and I'm not sure that they all were Jewish households anymore. But they sort of were left over, a remnant, sort of like a secret sign, if you will. So I think mezuzah is a great mitzvah to choose. That's all to say that. Um, Let me share my screen here. So the mitzvah is found in our parsha, and it is found next to the mitzvah of tefillin. So we'll see that they get sort of compared and contrasted in a lot of different ways, um, which in some ways is difficult, especially for women, as we'll see at the end. If they were treated as separate, I think that might be better for us. But so the two psukim here are ukshartem laot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot beinenecha, right? That's tefillin. Interestingly, it doesn't say the word tefillin. It doesn't tell you to make the box and to put the psukim inside of it, right? It doesn't tell you how to wrap it. It just says that it should be a sign on your hand and a symbol between your forehead. And the rabbinic tradition sort of takes it from there. Right? It doesn't say that you should wear them at Shacharit and not at Mincha. Like it's interesting. It's a very broad mitzvah. And then it also says, "Uketavtem al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha." Also inscribe them on your doorposts of your houses and on your gates. A little bit more direct. And we'll come back to this word uketavtem to inscribe them, because the question will become: is there a mitzvah to write a mezuzah? Is that separate from the mitzvah of affixing it to your doorpost? Right? An easy way to solve the problem would be to say, when you write it, you are affixing it. Here, I'll show you the picture before we look at the Gemara. This is a picture. These are Samaritan. I think I've talked about this before. One year, Will and I were in Israel during Pesach Sheni. And Pesach Sheni, the Samaritans on Har Gerizim have this big celebration of Pesach where they have a whole big ritual. They recite Perek Yud Dalet of Shmot as they walk through the town, and then they slaughter all of their goats, sort of like as a reenactment of Pesach. It's a wild experience. They welcome visitors. And Will and I went, and I feel like we've gotten a lot of mileage out of this. I talk about it often on Pesach, but when I was reading this Gemara, I thought they're describing a Samaritan mezuzah. So we don't have to imagine what it might have looked like. We can see if you ever went to Har Gerizim. This picture is from 2023. in Kiryat Luza on Har Grizim. And it's sort of what it looks like today. This is from the Israel Antiquities Authority. It's a 6th or 7th century Samaritan mezuzah, and they bear part of the Ten Commandments inside of them. So obviously, it's not how we practice today, but it is, you can sort of understand how this would be one mitzvah. Ukatavtem and also affixing it, right? Writing it and affixing it are almost the same thing. And so the Gemara in Menachot is trying to figure out, is this the case, right? Maybe there was some strain of Samaritan practice that was also Jewish practice at that time. Maybe they were the same at that time. I guess I should check my history before I teach this again. This is not, Rav Tabori does not mention the Samaritans. I just got very excited about it. So the Gemara says, Tana Rabbanan uchtav right? What does it mean? And you shall write them. Yachol yichtavena al ha'avanim. Could it be, one might think, that you write the mezuzah on the stones of the entrance, which is not even exactly what's happening here, but it's pretty close. Ne'amar kan kativa. To counter this, an expression of writing is stated here. Ve'ne'amar lahalan kativa. We say kativa with regard to mezuzah just as we wrote kativa there. Ma lahalan al sefer, just as there writing means on a book or a parchment. Afkan al sefer, here too it means writing on a cloth, on a piece of paper. And so I am curious now, as I'm thinking about it, about the history of Samaritans and the rabbis of the time of the Gemara. I wonder if there is actually an effort to distinguish ourselves. The other group of people that is interesting, Karaites, also have a sort of different type of mezuzah than uh, sort of regular Jews, whatever that means, right? If you go to the old city of Jerusalem, there's a very small Karaite community. I lived in the old city for a year. And so I went and I looked and I found those. At first, I thought that's what I was thinking of was the Karaite mezuzah, right? Karaites don't believe in the rabbinic tradition. They only believe in the Doraita tradition. And so they pick psukim that they write into a mezuzah, but it's not the same as our mezuzah. And so maybe at this time where different groups were differentiating from each other, I wonder if the rabbis are sort of doubling down on the right way to do it because there are so many other ways being presented. I don't know. But I think there is some elegance to this solution, right? To say, oh, Tem is affixing and writing at the same time, but we don't accept that. So now we have to decide, is affixing its own mitzvah? Is writing its own mitzvah? And when do we say the bracha, right? The bracha is so important because it's the signal that it's a mitzvah. So the Gemara in Gittin is actually talking about a host of things, and we'll see that I find it interesting that Mezuzah seems to interact or intersect heavily with questions of what non-Jews can do for us or with us. And also even mentions the Samaritans here, meaning that there seems to be something sort of closed about this mitzvah, right? Only Jews are supposed to do this thing. And we'll see it in a few places. Okay, so here the rabbis are talking, and they mention Rav Hamnuna, Beredza Rava. Rav Hamnuna, the son of Rabba Pasrunia, of Pasronia, a place, who taught Sefer Torah, Tfilin, Umezuzot, shekatavan min umasor goy ve'eved isha ve'katan ve'chuti v'Yisrael mishmud psulin. So, okay, this is, I think, an unfortunate tradition, right? That a Torah scroll, tefillin, or mezuzah that is written by a heretic, an informer, a non-Jew, a slave, a woman, a minor, a Samaritan, or an apostate are unfit. And the reason that we say that is because of the close proximity of mezuzah to tefillin. It feels like a little bit unfair to me. If only Moshe had mentioned tefillin a few psukim later, we might not associate this with tefillin. We typically associate tefillin only with men, and so free men and Jewish men. And so therefore, all of these other groups are forbidden from writing mezuzah at this moment, right? And so from this juxtaposition, because it says Shne'emar ukshartem ukatavtem, right? The binding of the tefillin and the writing of the mezuzah. Kol sheishno b'kshira yishno b'ktiva. Anyone who is exempt from, anyone who is included in the mezuzah is included in the ketiva, in the tefillin is included in the mezuzah. V'chol she'eino b'kshira eino b'ketiva. And anyone who is not included in the wrapping of tefillin is also not included in the group of people who can write a mezuzah, right? Interestingly, we're not talking about who can put the mezuzah on your door when you move in your house, although we'll see that some people don't think women can do that either. We seem to only be talking about the writing of the mezuzah. And now I brought us this paragraph from Rav Tabori's article, and I brought us some of the psukim just to see the action words. So we're going to review this within the text of Rav Tabori, but just so you can see, for me, it was helpful to parse it out here. So one way to think about mezuzah is thinking about it in relation to tefillin. Another way is to think about it in relation to sukkah and to tzitzit. And the reason for that is that both mitzvot have sort of multi-dimensional mitzvot attached to them, right? So Chag HaSukkot ta'aseh lecha, which is translated here as you shall hold, but I think it would be better off to say you should make, right? You should make for yourself a sukkah. But we actually do not say a bracha when we put up our sukkah, right? When do we say the bracha? When we sit in our sukkah, right? So the making of the sukkah and the sitting in the sukkah, or the dwelling in the sukkah, seem to be sort of distinct. The one mentioned in the Torah is not the one we make a bracha over, right? It's certainly not the one we like fuss over. And similarly here in Bamidbar, when we looked at tzitzit, right, it uses the word va'asu, to make for yourself. Again, not when you wear, but when you make them. This very much inspired my husband, who for a while before we had many children would tie his own tzitzit, because it seems like there's this mitzvah of making them. Although notably, right, when do we say the bracha? When we put them on, not when we make them. So looking at these two psukim, with these two psukim in mind, we can look at the She'eltot of Rav Achai Gaon, and then it's Siv who comments on that work. And so what Rav Tabari writes, right? Alternatively, however, one might suggest that the specific mention of writing in the context of mezuzah bears particular halachic significance. In describing the mitzvah of sukkah, right, Rav Achai Gaon writes that Bnei Israel must make a sukkah and dwell in it for 7 days. The Netziv points out that these two verbs, to make and to dwell, imply this dual aspect of the mitzvah, a requirement to build and also to dwell in the sukkah. And indeed, the Torah writes, right, this is the pasuk we had above, right, that you shall make for yourself Chag HaSukkot, which likely refers to an obligation to make or build a sukkah. Although the mitzvah of dwelling in the sukkah is obviously the primary aspect of this mitzvah, nonetheless, making the sukkah also constitutes a mitzvah. The Netziv adds that this principle applies anytime the Torah makes specific mention of the preparatory stages of any given mitzvah. The Gemara in Menachot discusses the issue of reciting a bracha when making tzitzit. The Gemara says that just as there's no bracha on writing tefillin and mezuzot, so too there is no bracha recited when making tzitzit. The Netziv points out that nowhere does the Gemara even raise the possibility of reciting a bracha when preparing a lulav or making a shofar, right? Because those mitzvot are not discussed as a preparatory aspect when we read in the Torah. And so it's this like very specific, interesting subset of mitzvot, right? Tzitzit, sukkah, tefillin, mezuzah, where it seems like there's maybe some other element to the mitzvah besides the sort of actively fulfilling it. The Gemara discusses such a possibility of reciting a bracha when preparing for a mitzvah only regarding those mitzvot whose preparation also involves a biblical command. Right, this is the pasuk we have above. They shall make tzitzit for themselves, but never does it say make a lulav. The Gemara therefore reasons that when there's a specific command to make the mitzvah, one recites a bracha on the preparation of the mitzvah. The Gemara concludes, however, that the fact that tefillin and mezuzah have no bracha over the preparation indicates that even when the Torah mentions the preparation, no bracha is required over the preparatory stages. The Tosfot, which I did not bring because it was long and I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole, note that the Talmud Yerushalmi actually disagrees with the Talmud Bavli, right? The Jerusalem Talmud does not always agree with the Talmud Bavli, and here there's a disagreement, and the Yerushalmi requires a bracha on making tzitzit, building a sukkah, and writing tefillin, right? It's a really different experience. If you could imagine saying a bracha while building your sukkah, I think, I think in Chicago, as in many communities, there are like high schoolers who will come build your sukkah for you, right? If it's too big and unwieldy, or you're busy cooking or working or whatever, the schools do like these fundraisers, right? If you had to say a bracha when you made your sukkah, you might think twice about outsourcing it, right? Same thing with tying tzitzit or writing tefillin or mezuzah, right? We often outsource those things. And if it was a mitzvah, I think we would think about it a little bit differently. But that subset of mitzvot where the Torah talks about the preparation are the only ones where we would even think about, right, making a bracha. Certainly, the person who makes your shofar or your ties your lulav for you would not make a bracha. Rav Tabori points out, though, that interestingly, the She'el Tot, right? So this is the rabbi who we're talking about up here, where we're talking about the duality of the mitzvah. When he finally gets down to writing the mitzvah of mezuzah, what he says is the machayavin de Beit Yisrael lemikboa mezuzah. Right, that the people of Israel are required to affix a mezuzah. He sort of loses that wording of ukatavtem altogether. Right. So it seems as though there is a strong desire to make writing the mezuzah not actually the focus of the mitzvah at all. And similarly, the Rambam, and remember, the Rambam does not even count this as a mitzvah. Uh-oh, did I lose you guys?
Mm.
Oh no. Okay, you're still here. Whew. Everyone was very still for a minute. I got nervous. I had lost you. The Rambam, remember, writes in his introduction, which we looked at about tzitzit, that there are mitzvot that are good to do, but you're only obligated if you find yourself in that conditional space. And so, if you choose to live on a boat or in a tent, you would actually not have to put up mezuzahs at all. So he is not counting it as a mitzvah. But when he's talking about how to do this mitzvah, should it come to you, he does not talk about the writing at all, right? He talks about kodem shik ba'ena b'mezuzat petach mevarech tchila. When do you say the bracha? You say the bracha when you affix it to your doorpost. Oh, sorry, I did not take out Hashem's name. Hopefully, no one printed this. Barech atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kitshenu mitzvah v'tzivanu likboa mezuzah, which is the bracha we say, right? We don't say anything about writing it. Ve'eno mevarech b'shat ktivata shekviata zohi hamitzvah. Right? The Rambam is explicit.
Yeah, and underneath it said 7:21:26.
The mitzvah is not about the writing. The Rambam says the mitzvah is about the affixing. However, interestingly, this is a place where the Rambam diverges from the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch follows the Tur, where he says, he writes that, you okay? One of my children is loudly sniffling outside my door. He writes, Mitzvat aseh lichtov perek shma. Right? He says it is actually a positive commandment to write the Shema, V'haya im shamoa, and the V'haya im shamoa, right, which follows, V'likbam al mezuzat hapetach, and to fix it onto the side of your door. Right. So we have sort of a divergence into two groups. On the one hand, we have the Rambam and the the Rav Achai Gaon, who say that the mitzvah is in the affixing. On the other hand, the Shulchan Aruch following the Tur is saying that it is actually a mitzvah to write the mezuzah as well, to write those prakim. He mentions this idea that doing this will lengthen our days and the days of our children. And the Ramah has a super interesting, I can't fix it because I'm not in my Google Doc. The Ramah makes an interesting decision. He says, if you can only do one, right? In today, it is still quite expensive to have tefillin or mezuzah. If you can only afford a mezuzah or tefillin, what should you do? He says, let him acquire the tefillin. Yikaneh tefillin velo mezuzah. Why is that? Mitzvah shehi chovat haguf adifa. That the bodily obligation is more important, right? As important as a mezuzah is, at the end of the day, the Ramah is saying, listen, the tefillin, which you actually sort of wrap on your body, you can imagine if tzitzit were very expensive, it might be the same. There's something very powerful about that bodily mitzvah. And at the end of the day, your house is not your body. I thought that was interesting, so I left it in. It is sort of parenthetical to our argument, right? But so the Shulchan Aruch is saying, no, it is a mitzvah to write the mezuzah. So What is the nafkamina? Right, on some level, this is an interesting question. You could decide whether or not to count it sort of as a mitzvah, to take it very seriously, to learn how to do it yourself. You could follow whoever you think is right about whether or not you should say a bracha over this mitzvah. But what is the ramification of deciding this one way or the other? So Rav Tabari brings up the issue of women writing mezuzot. He brings Rav Elimelech Vintner, the Minchat Elimelech, who talks about this. And he says a woman is exempt from tefillin, right? We know this because it's a mitzvah shezman grama, right? That we only put on our tefillin during the daytime. And so therefore women are exempt and therefore they can't write tefillin. That sort of makes sense, right? A woman can't write the tefillin if she's not obligated to wear them because she's on a different level than the men who will then wear them. That's very clear. We could chase down all of these sources and prove that that is clear. However, there is considerable controversy concerning the issue of a woman's obligation to write a Sefer Torah. See the mitzvah chinuch, mitzvah 613, the 613th commandment, chapter 4, and the sources quoted therein. The Rambam ruled that a woman may not write a Sefer Torah, not very surprising, and the Shulchan Aruch rules accordingly. Right? So that is generally how communities practice today. It means that a woman can't even correct the Sefer Torah because that's part of writing a Sefer Torah. So there are many women scribes today who are writing other things. Notably, women often start with a Megillah. But they are not allowed to write Sefer Torah within the like sort of modern Orthodox community. The Tur, however, omitted this halacha, an omission interpreted by the Drisha as indicating that the Tur allows having a Sefer Torah written by a woman. What I think is fascinating about this is the idea that there was a woman who could write a Sefer Torah at the time of the Tur. Like it was a live question for him. I have no idea if that's true or not, but it seems like maybe the Tur did not say women are forbidden because he thought they were allowed, right? Now, when it comes to Mezuzah, the Gemara establishes that women are included in this obligation. Right? Maybe I should have found that brachot to see what was going on there. Nevertheless, the Rambam disqualifies women from writing a mezuzah. In his view, a woman's obligation is simply to affix the mezuzah. Writing the mitzvah, the mezuzah, however, is not a part of the mitzvah, right? All of a sudden, the Rambam's decision to count out writing of the mezuzah has a real implication. But the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch, as we saw, maintain that writing the mezuzah also constitutes a mitzvah. It would follow then that according to the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch, a woman may write a mezuzah. Indeed, neither the Torah nor the Shulchan Aruch make any mention of a woman's disqualification from writing mezuzot. Now, I brought this paragraph, A, because I think it is lovely when women take on new mitzvot and learn new things. For a long time, was a woman who wrote the cloth of smicha for Yeshivat Maharat, which was very beautiful. Women write very beautiful megillot. I won't say which community I was visiting. I've been lots of places over the last month for Shabbos. I was sitting at a Shabbat table. A woman told me she was learning how to be a soferet, a scribe. And I said, "Oh, did you start with a mezuzah?" Because I knew that that's where sofrim generally start. And she said, "Oh, well, the rabbi of this community said I shouldn't write a mezuzah because, of my gender." And I thought that that was so sad, especially given that it seems like the Shulchan Aruch, whom we follow pretty regularly, seems like maybe women can write mezuzot, right? It's gotten all tied up in tefillin and in the affixing versus the writing. Um, I think it's unfortunate because I think like it's a beautiful place. It's a good thing to start writing as a soferet or a sofer, and this idea of sort of embodying our mitzvot and writing a mezuzah is a really beautiful idea. I'm not sure that I would take that on, but I encourage people to think about writing your own mezuzah. It feels like a really cool practice. And it's a good thing to know. People are very superstitious about mezuzah. Like those stories of like a sick child or a series of financial hardships, and then they check their mezuzah and the mezuzah was faded or whatever it is. And then when they fix it, everything resolves. Now, I don't know if it's quite that magical, but the Rev Tabori finished his article with this snippet from the Tur, right? The Tur precedes the Shulchan Aruch, and that is who we follow about the writing, or that's who the Shulchan Aruch follows about writing and affixing being mitzvot. But what he says is that we should be very careful with it, right? Tarich lihizaher ma'od ba. And this is because mipnei sheyesh b'mezuzah yechudo shel hakadosh baruch hu, that the mezuzah has the unification of Hashem inside of it, right? And if you have affixed a proper mezuzah to your door, v'tamid b'vo'o v'tzeito yizkor yechudo shel hakadosh baruch hu, right? That we want to remember in our comings and goings that Hashem has this powerful unity. And so the mezuzah is not just an identification, as a Jewish person or something that we do because it's a mitzvah. It has this really big sort of meta concept that stands behind it. And every time we go in and out of a door and we kiss the door frame, we can remind ourselves of the Yechudo Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, V'yitin Yirato Al Panav. And this should help us remember a fear of God, so that we won't sin, right? It's kind of like wearing tzitzit or all of these embodied mitzvot. When we enter and exit our house or our doorways, it's an opportunity to remind ourselves of the importance of fearing
But
and loving God and God's
They were closed.
unity. V'gedola mizeh shahabayit nishmar al yada. And there's this idea that the house is guarded, right? As I said, this like sort of superstitious idea that the Torah mentions that the mezuzah will protect us in some way. Perhaps even harkening back to the idea of the spreading of the blood on the lintel of the door in Yetziat Mitzrayim, right? That there's something that like marks the house or the people inside of it as God-fearing or religious or observant of mitzvot, and that like will help guard our house and keep it for us. So I think it was a lovely mitzvah for Rav Tabori to cover, and it is indeed much bigger than sort of uh, the little box that goes on our door frame, right? It has this much bigger and more beautiful piece to it. And I think that it's interesting to think about what it means when we make these sort of what feels like abstract decisions about, oh, this part is a mitzvah, this part isn't, that it has a real implication on who is included in the mitzvah later, which is not always clear before. So this was an interesting example. I am now going to stop talking and sharing and welcome other ideas and feedback.
I loved your presentation. That was great. I was so excited this morning when I saw the topic, Mezuzah. I decided to cheat, and I went to study the book of Google to
Tell me
yeah,
what you learned.
and I knew I had read that Micah Goodman had I think one of the few books that he wrote about Torah and Judaism that was translated to English. That most of them are Hebrew and this is not available in translation. And I put Micah Goodman, Mezuzah, Mitzvot, and he states that I think it was Mishneh Torah. The Rambam writes about the Mezuzah and all the components of the Shema, feeling, tzitzis, etc. And he says that the Rambam's goal was to remove the superstition from the practice of Judaism. That having a text written from the Torah would be a way to bring back people back in focus in Torah, something rational. Maimonides was a rationalist, so he thought that reason and Torah went together. So, and that was the virtue of having Mezuzah written in words instead of magical acts like you said. I know that the Lubavitch Chabad is very big into check your Mezuzah. Get a donation. It goes together. So and people do tell stories like that, which according to this concept, they're using Rabban and Micah Goodman. It's not. It's a no. It's not.
I know. I wonder, like the Rambam must be, what do they say, like turning in his grave to hear all these like superstitious attachments to mezuzah, right? If it was meant to be the sign of something more than the superstition, and we use it as a superstitious object, but um, I think you're right, right? If we think about what's inside the mezuzah, it is much more rational, right? And it brings us to the Yehudo Shel Hashem, and it brings us to fearing and loving Hashem. It is much more rational than superstitious.
Yeah.
Um,
And the fact that it's part of the Shema, you go put the mezuzah in the doorpost and or gates. I think that's the Shema is the fundamental behavior uh, for a Jew. Particularly
Hmm.
if you tie in Nasev and Shema, do it and listen, do and understand, do and believe. The doing comes first. I love to have my kids when they were little make sure that they kiss the mezuzah and the
Yeah.
it was a behavioral thing that led to some understanding somehow.
Hmm. Yeah, I think there is like right that embodied piece of it, which is beautiful. My son likes to just like climb up and down the stairs to our third floor to kiss the mezuzah because it was like a fun game.
That's beautiful.
It
That
is.
stays in his
I'm
forever.
Yeah, I think right, and even you see sometimes, right, if you're paying attention in a non-Jewish space where there are lots of Jews, you sometimes will see someone have that like sort of tick, like they start to reach out to the doorpost and then the mezuzah is not there and they have to like just keep going. I noticed that when we visit some of my cousins, like if we have a family event in a place with a person who might not have a mezuzah on every single door in their house, and my former cousins come through, it's like it's just such a habit. They even if they don't see the mezuzah there, they like reach, right? There's something sort of beautiful about that, like being embedded inside of your body, like a muscle memory.
Mm.
Um, but I also was thinking as you were talking, Nelson, that what is interesting about mezuzah is that it's become this industry that is I don't want to say making light of what's inside of the mezuzah, but hold on, I'm going to share my screen. I just Googled interesting mezuzot. Can you see my screen now, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. And there's like Lego ones are very popular for kids. Like, look at this ridiculous, that banana thing. I don't even totally understand the banana thing, but there's the banana.
There's, oh,
There are lots of ones that are sort of like Jerusalem themed, right? We have a good deal of those in our house. Like it's interesting, right? This is like olive wood. It's become a statement piece, I guess, is maybe what I would say, which I wonder like what the Rambam would have felt about that as well, I guess is what my point. Some of the cases are quite elaborate and expensive also, right? It's like the cloth is expensive, and if you go to Chabad, you can get like a free or a $5 white case, but these cases these are all in like the $30 to $60 range, but ironically, the banana one is $142, right? Um, so, I don't know what that says about our relationship to the mitzvah. We also have fun Chanukiot and uh, etrog boxes. Like there are sukkahs that are beautiful. It's not a bad thing. I don't mean it as a critique, but just it feels sort of not in line with that very holy task that's inside of it, maybe is what I would say.
Well, I will look from a different parallel perspective. This is beautiful objects. These are beautiful objects. It's art, and art.
Hmm.
In, any art takes an artist to do it, and becomes
Hmm.
valuable. And if you are a Van Gogh, Picasso, or Rembrandt, that's millions of dollars. If you are
Hmm.
well, Shmuel down the street who's trying to make a living. Is supply and demand if you're going to in a market economy. So
Yeah,
if
true.
it's really beautiful and people appreciate, then it's going to be worth them. How do you measure worth? Uh,
Hmm. I guess you're right. It's Hidur Mitzvah also.
yeah.
I think as with anything, sometimes it feels like it gets out of control. But the truth is, if a Lego mezuzah makes kids excited about the mitzvah of mezuzah, that's not a bad thing. I don't mean to be hard on the funny mezuzot, just that I think that balance of Hijra Mitzvah, I always struggle with it. Like spending so much money on an etrog when you should be spending money on whatever else, right? Spending so much money on a mezuzah case when the cloth inside is more important. But it's a part of that sort of identification, right? This is a part of who we are as people who have mezuzot. We don't want to just like hide them in a small little box. We want to make it big and beautiful and noticeable. Yeah. And interestingly, the Karaites put the Ten Commandments instead of Shema.
Uh-huh.
Right? So they lose that Yehudo Shal Hashem piece of it, but they pick pretty important psukim, I guess I would say. Another important reminder. I think those guardrails that the mitzvot established for us about sort of just keeping us in line, reminding us of our values are really beautiful. And the mezuzah seems to be one of those.
I've been wondering about the derivation of the word itself, mezuzah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I wonder
Interesting
if it's
question.
Aramaic or what. Maybe.
Well, it comes from, I'm gonna pull it up on my phone. It comes from the Torah, right? It's the pasuk in the Torah. Hold on, let me pull that back up.
Yeah.
Is Uchtavtem al mezuzot beitecha. And so I wonder, it's in the Torah. Let's see. That's Devarim 6. Look it up on on Safaria in the dictionary here. Okay, 6:9. Here we go. Let's see what the word mezuzot means. Of course, it says no definition for mezuzah. I'll have to look up here. Let's see. Because I do wonder, we've made it a very holy word, but I think it is actually sort of just a technical word for your doorpost.
Oh.
It's funny when those words take on that added meaning, right? Okay. Chapter 6. Oops. Okay, Pasuk 9. Let's see if we can find mezuz, maybe. Mezuzahs. I think it actually, maybe it means like a mizaz. Let's see. Whoops. I don't know. These are not the same word. It's weird that it's so hard to find the definition here. I'll have to do some more looking, I think. Let's see. Mezuzah. Just a mezuzah is a doorpost, technically.
Okay.
I'm looking to see. Sometimes it tells you what the language is. Okay, wait, here it is. I'm gonna share my screen so you can see it. Okay, so see here in this middle category is where I found it in the Jastro. So the mezuzah, right, is the door frame or door post. And it seems like in some places it doesn't even actually have to do with the scroll, right, the mitzvah of mezuzah. It just has to do with the door in general. Like it's not as meaningful as a word in that way. Right. Right. Let's see. Here it is. Right. Al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha. So on the doorposts of your home and of your gates. Sorry, it's so small now. Let's see if I take away that extra one. Right. So here's the pasuk again. To inscribe them on your the doorposts of your house and your gates. And here is the Jastro word of it. Right? The coupling set of a door frame. There is a discussion in the Mishnah as to whether if you only have one door frame, is that sufficient on which you must hang a mezuzah, or do you need more than one? Because it's a mezuzot. It's a set of door frames. And here, I don't know what this pasuk is, right? We could look at it in Shemot, where it seems to be actually just talking about a doorpost, as opposed to this mitzvah of the mezuzah on the delet. Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking up Google again, and with AI now everything comes out very quickly. There is a linguistic derivation of the word mezuzah, which is a Proto-Semitic root ZWZ, so zuzah, which means standing or passing by, passing through, which relates to door. So mezuzah, from standing, from it's that kind of thing. But it's ancient Hebrew or even pre-Hebrew.
Although now that you say that, we use that word in modern Hebrew, right? Lazuz
Yeah.
is to move. Zaz,
No.
right? Move over. So it does sort of have that like coming and goings
Yeah.
implication. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, Zuz, that's the root you can see here.
One bad story about mezuzahs is
Yeah.
in Toronto, there were one or two occasions that a high-rise residential building, have mostly by Jews in a Jewish neighborhood. In the morning, people woke up, found out that all their mezuzahs in their doors were being desecrated, so destroyed or damaged somehow.
It was not it was not like ill intent, right? I think it was like they repainted all the door posts or the walls or something and
Was anti-Jewish demonstration by
oh,
somebody.
it was. I remember a similar story, maybe it was older than that, where it was just an accident. The building repainted all of the walls and they took down all the mezuzahs because they were trying to paint the
I,
entirety of the
I don't know.
doorpost.
Might be maybe a similar story or same story, but when I read it was in along with other anti-Semitic events in Toronto,
Mm.
Canada.
I mean, maybe that one is different. I do think that sometimes there are in dorm rooms also you hear about it, people who desecrate them or, throw something yucky at them to right, because it very much is a sort of an indication a Jewish person lives here.
I'll
Yeah.
find out more. I'll report next week.
Yeah, and sometimes people say, oh, I'm nervous to put the mezuzah on my outside door. Do I have to, right? There are a lot of interesting questions about, do you have to put a mezuzah on your screened-in porch or your walk-in closet, right? Like what constitutes a room and a doorpost? When I was moving, when you move, if you sell your home to Jews, you're supposed to leave the mezuzahs, which is, of course, a very expensive and often sort of personal endeavor to leave all those behind. And so the like loophole is you say, well, I'll sell you the mezuzahs at $5,000 a mezuzah. And then the person says, oh, no, thank you. I don't want them. I'll put up my own. And then you can take them with you. I was very relieved that a non-Jewish person bought my house, so I didn't even have to play the game. But this idea that like if a Jewish person buys your house, you should leave them the mezuzah is actually, I think, quite beautiful, right? Like this house remains sort of under the protection of this mezuzah. But again, they're expensive and they're personal, so we don't do that anymore. Okay, we could probably, as usual, spend like a whole nother hour talking about all the interesting halachot of mezuzot, but instead, I will thank you for joining me on this summer day. I hope you have an easy, meaningful, appropriately mournful day on Thursday for Tisha B'Av. We are Zooming Echa, so you can join in this channel, this station, for Echa reading. I think Mincha and Mariv starts at 8 and then followed by Echa, so maybe 8:20-ish. If you'd like to hear Echa as being read in the sanctuary, you are welcome to do so. And I hope you have a good Shabbat Nachamu. You feel the comfort of Shabbat. Should we come out on the other side intact, as I'm sure we will. And I look forward to learning with you next Tuesday.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very
So
much.
nice to see you all. Have a wonderful evening. Early Shabbat Shalom. Bye.
Shabbat shalom to you.